Hi, today's webinar or live video streaming is going to be about how to review and approve changes to your user manual. Medical device companies have to be very careful about how they go about making changes to any kind of user manual because that has a legal requirement. It's the instructions for use of the device. So when you make a change to the instruction for use, that's a change to your labeling of the device. It affects the indications for use for the device, how the device is used, and any kind of mistakes in the process of making revisions to that document could also end up causing use errors in the product or some other problem that could lead to a recall. So it's very important that you don't just consider it another document that you casually review and sign and approve the release of it. It actually has some regulatory requirements and has to go through a regulatory review. So whenever your company is going to make a change to your instruction for use or user manual, you shouldn't be approving that and reviewing that under document control. It should really be considered design control changes because the specifications for the content of your user manual are actually considered a design specification. They're part of the outputs of your design of your device. They're located in your MDR or technical file. So your company has to be very thorough in its review and approval of any kind of user manual changes. The number one thing that will get you into problem is if you make slight changes to the wording for the indications for use. When you have a product in the US and you have indication for use, if you want to make changes to that, that almost always results in having to do a new regulatory submission, either a special 510K or a traditional 510K, or for higher risk devices, it would even require a PMA. So if you're going to make the change to that, that's going to require a new submission. The wording of that has to be identical to what's in Form 3881 or the indication for use statement that goes in your regulatory filing. So that's number one item. Number two item, warnings and precautions and any kind of contraindications that are in your manual. If you remove those, you typically need to have some sort of regulatory filing because now you're saying this thing that was a problem before, it's no longer a problem. Don't worry about it. Well, maybe you have testing to back that up, but the FDA is going to want to review that. So when you remove contraindications, remove a warning, remove a precaution, you have to have some validation to back that up. And therefore, you're going to have to submit some sort of submission to the regulatory body. Same thing is true for other countries, whether it's Europe or Canada. If you're going to remove any of those warning precautions or you make a change to the indication for use statement, those usually trigger regulatory filing. Now, if you add a warning or precaution because of post-market surveillance, that doesn't require typically a regulatory filing because you're expected to add those immediately if, as part of your complaint file processing or post-market surveillance, you determine, oh, there's this new risk we didn't know about before, then you have to add that to your instruction for use. If there is something in your instruction for use that is not clear and is resulting in use errors, and you make a minor change to your instructions to eliminate that use error and make it more clear and prevent the use error, those are the kinds of changes that most regulators don't require you to do a new submission for, because you're making a minor change. It's to improve or reduce the risk of a use error. However, if you change the mechanism of operation of your device or add a new feature to your device, that's a significant change to the functionality of your device that usually requires a new user manual that includes that how to access that functionality and provides instructions for it. It also often will require additional usability testing, performance testing, and a new regulatory filing. So you have to be careful about what things in the instruction for use are going to trigger a new filing, what things are not going to require a new filing. But let's pick something simple. Let's say we're adding a caution statement and we're revising the instructions slightly to prevent a use error, basically telling people don't do this thing because it will result in an error. It could be an error that would cause injury. It might be an error that just gives you a bad result. It gives you an error message on the screen if you have a computer display. For those types of changes, typically that wouldn't require a new regulatory filing, but you still need to control it. So one of the things that you're going to have to do is probably update the revision of your user manual. Typically, we will have A, B, C, D revisions and a document control number. So it might be label 45, Rev A right now when it's 510K cleared, and we're going to update it to label 45, Rev B. No problem. So now what are you going to also have to do? Well, you might have different international versions of that label translated. So you might have Rev A in English, Rev A in German, Rev A in Spanish, and now you need to update each of those translations for the new instructions as well. You might want to do some formative testing just to verify that this new version of the instruction for use is going to truly be more clear. So you might have somebody that hasn't done this before try to do it and see if they make the same mistakes that people were making before. You might go back to people that made that mistake and ask if this is more clear. Those are two of the things that you might do to test and make sure that your change to the instructions are more clear, not less clear, or create some other problem you hadn't anticipated. Another thing that you might have to do if you have printed IFUs, which most devices do, you might have a lot of inventory of that printed IFU. Well, that's just like any other part in your inventory. You have to figure out what you're going to do with that. Are you going to take all the open up all the boxes that you have in your warehouse, remove the old instruction for use and user manual and put in a new one? Or are you going to just ship what you had and only new product will get that? And that's a tough question because it really depends on, are you causing any harm to people or potential harm to people with this use error that you're trying to fix? Or is this just an inconvenience for people? If there's any kind of safety issue, you should definitely replace the old version in your inventory. Any product in the field, should you do for that? Typically, the right approach would be an advisory notice. And yes, that is technically a correction and removal or a recall. But it's not a class 1 recall unless it's going to cause serious injury or death to people, in which case you should be handling this much more aggressively. And there shouldn't be a lot of debate as to whether you're going to replace user manual instructions. But if it's the way I had put it in the first place, where it's an inconvenience and it's showing up as an error message on the screen, that's not the kind of thing that typically would require a recall. There's no potential for harm to anybody. So you could justify, we're not going to recall anything in the field. And depending on how much inventory we have and how desperately that product is needed, we may decide to replace some of the product in our warehouse. We may decide to replace none of it. But certainly any inventory that we have that hasn't been built into product, we ought to seriously consider maybe we should replace that inventory. I have seen companies over-label products and put a sticker over a section to explain it. I've seen people put inserts into the manuals, but those are the kinds of things that you would typically do as a temporary measure until the new label or user manuals are available and the old manuals are used up. In addition, you're going to probably have outstanding purchase orders with vendors that are printing these labels for you. And so you might want to communicate to them, oh, we have these new versions of the user manual. Could you please replace the controlled document in your inventory or a controlled document in your files? Rev A is obsolete now. Rev B is the current version. And please confirm that you've received that and updated it. So those are some of the things that you would be doing. You might be printing content on demand. Some companies do on-demand printing of instructions. And in those cases, you're going to have to remove the old file and put in the new electronic file so people are only able to access the current version. Another thing is if you have an electronic device, oftentimes the instruction for use or user manual will be downloadable from the device's operating system or can be displayed on the screen. In those cases, you're going to have to update your software, and you should do some validation of that change. It would be more considered a patch. We're trying to make it current to the most current version of instructions, so we need to swap out the old with the new. It's a minor change. It shouldn't affect the functionality of the software, so it should be a very minimal, abbreviated validation of that software, but it's still something that should be validated whenever you make a change, just in case inadvertently somebody makes a change to the software that negatively affects it. So that gives you some examples of the kinds of controls that would take place. Sometimes people will even put special things in the label, like a color or a stamp or some sort of symbol or something, to help people remember, oh, this is the new version. During the transition period, we want to be looking for, we only have this new version, we don't have the old version. Just looking for the letter A or B might be enough, but some companies, I've even seen them want to make some way to more clearly differentiate the old label from the new label, and they'll make some sort of a color change or change on the border that's much more visible visually from afar. And that way anybody on the floor sees an instruction without that change, they know there's something wrong. So those are some of the things that would be done. You might update your risk management file. If you were eliminating a risk, use-related risk, or reducing that risk, that's definitely something that should be in your use-related risk analysis, and you should be updating that. You might indicate this might be part of a CAPA related to complaints that you've had or any kind of post-market surveillance. So we've reviewed the post-market surveillance. We're going to update our risk management file. We're going to update the rest of the documentation. So you're going to have a technical file update. You have an update to your technical file index. You're going to communicate that to a notified body. If you have the device licensed in Canada, you would have a license amendment. They always want a copy of all the labeling. So that would be something you would include in that license amendment. So there's a lot of little things that come into play. Did you update your DMR? Did you update your technical file? Did you update your software? Did you update your license amendment? Did you notify the notified body? All of these things are required. You have a UDI number, because the UDI should be traceable to each version of the product. Now that you've made a change to the labeling, you really need to update your UDI number as well. You're going to obsolete the old and you're going to have a new number, or you're going to have both active for a certain time if some are in the field still being sold. So even the UDI might need to be updated for your system. So that's assigning a new number, updating the GUDID database, updating your UDIMED database, updating all your electronic files and your labeling software for generating the barcode. That's a lot of things that you have to keep in mind for just a little tiny change in your user manual or instruction for use. For those of you that want a little bit more information about how to control a design change in general, yesterday we actually did a live webinar on design changes, and you can purchase that as a download. It was recorded, so if you purchase that between now and February 3rd, it's half price. It's $64.50, and you can get that recording. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us, and we can talk about your specific situation in a more confidential environment. And then if you are interested in labeling itself, and you're just interested in how do I control instruction for use, how do I write instruction for use, how do I update them, that's something we're actually going to cover in the month of February. We're actually going to have a webinar on February 28th, the last day of the month, on how to write in instruction for use, or IFU. And so we're actually taking our procedure for labeling and translation, and we're splitting it. The labeling portion is going to be remaining as procedure 30, but we're going to have a new document control number used for the translation portion. We're updating our translation procedure to include more references to the ISO 17100 standard that's used for translation houses, on how you control the coding and translation process. And then we're going to, this first release is going to be the labeling procedure. We're going to be providing a new template that's updated for what should be the content and format of an instruction for use. We're going to include some requirements in there related from the EMC guidance on any electromedical devices, what warnings and precautions should be there. So it prompts people, if you have that type of device, make sure you include those warnings. So we're going to provide a lot more detail and guidance on how to control those labels and how to create them in the first place. But next month, if you're interested in that, go to our webinars page. We have a link there. The page isn't published yet, so you can't purchase it today, but we should have that ready this weekend. And so by Monday, you'll be able to register for the brand new webinar on how to write an IFU or an instruction for use. So I hope to see you next month in that new webinar. And if you have any other suggestions for webinars, please don't hesitate to go to our suggestion box. There'll be some hyperlinks down below in this video. One of the links will be for the new webinar on how to write an IFU. One of the links is for the old webinar that we just finished yesterday on design change control. And we'll also provide the suggestion box link and a link to our new labeling procedure. And the translation procedure, we'll probably put a placeholder in there, but that won't be available until almost March. I hope that's helpful to everybody, and thank you very much for joining me on the live streaming video this week. Next week's live streaming video will be again at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll do another live streaming video, and we'll put the topic on our webinars page later on this weekend. Thank you, and have a great day. Bye-bye.